Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for coming along to tonight's stream. So, just to get the introductions first, up there in the top right-hand corner is Rob Reynolds of Chocolatey. He is a reasonably prolific open source contributor to various different projects over time. I've known him for quite a few years now, and I'm happy to say that he's currently my boss. I work for Rob on the Chocolatey project. So what we have, I'm just reading some of the messages in the chat room. Stuck at starting. Are you still seeing an issue, Maurice, or are we now good? I'm hoping we're good. I'm going to go with that. It's fine because you're saying good morning, Rob. So that's good. Okay. What we are going to be talking about today, hopefully, is mainly we're going to be talking about pull requests going into Chocolatey. Now, what we're going to hopefully be discussing is kind of the other side of a pull request. So to date on the streams, I've been kind of focusing on creating a pull request. So I as a project contributor have been making a pull request into projects. So the other side of this is going to be looking at it from a maintainer's point of view. What is it that a maintainer has to do when looking at a PR to know that it's ready to be pulled in? What's the kind of thought processes that a maintainer goes through to say it's good, it's ready, or it needs some feedback to say things aren't quite what we're wanting? So that's kind of what we're focusing on, and we're going to be focusing specifically on the Chocolatey project, and that's why we've got Rob here to kind of work on that side of things. For anyone who has seen some previous streams that I've done, we did sort of an introduction stream earlier, quite a while ago now, talking about how you would start contributing to Chocolatey. What do you need to do? I'm just trying to find the link here on this stream. What do you need to do in order to, first of all, build Chocolatey? How do you build the source code for Chocolatey? So there were two streams that kind of focused on that, and that is really these two that I'm pointing out here. So it was from back in January. We did part 2. On 21st of January, we did part 2. And just before that, we had another stream which was focusing specifically on how you would create an export command for Chocolatey CLI. Now, what we did in those two streams was we got the source code to build, we added some additional functionality, and then we tested it. And really, one of the first pull requests that we're going to be looking at tonight on the stream is the output of that stream, which was the export command, and another pull request, or at least one other pull request, which is a smaller pull request, which is just a change to some of the configuration that Chocolatey uses internally. So with that in mind, I guess we'll just get started. So I guess one of the first questions that come up one of the first questions I've heard people ask Rob when we've been looking at contributing to Chocolatey is, where does someone start? And what I mean by that is there are two branches, or there are two main branches on Chocolatey. One is the master branch and one is the stable branch. So I don't know, Rob, if you want to jump in and say why there are two, where a contributor would kind of start to know whether they're going into the master branch or they're going into the stable branch, and kind of the thought processes that you go through when you're reviewing a PR with those things in mind. If you wanted to put some words to that, that'd be great.
Sure. So really the best place to start is there is a committers.md file at the very top level and a contributing.md. So that contributing.md is where folks are going to find really good information on that contributing process. As you bringing that up, go to that contributing one. The committers is really for us. So the contributing, as you come down, it's like, am I in the right place? And hopefully we are. So once we get down to contributing process down there, it's really about saying, we're going to start the prerequisites. Can we sign the contributor license agreement, and then all of the other stuff that kind of goes through there. And we're kind of trying to help define for folks, if it's a trivial contribution, we're not going to need that CLA sign. Unfortunately, a one character change, if it's on production code, probably still going to require that CLA because it's not actually trivial at that point. If it's like a documentation change for a typo, of course, that would be trivial. It's left up to the actual code, the maintainers to figure that out. And then we get into that next section, right, which says, I do want to contribute. I'm able to go through all this stuff here. How do I do that, right? So the very first thing is, okay, there may be some open issues, or I might have something that I want to do. And so the very first thing is, if I have something I want to do, I can't really find an issue that relates to that. I would reach out through the mailing list or through one of our chat methods, right? The Getter is one of those, and say, hey, here's something that I think Chocolatey should do. Is this something that you guys think is kosher? Sure. And you get that nod, and then you start kind of working on it. The other thing is, you said you may find some issues. You're looking for those ones that are with that up for grabs label. And so we actually specifically help you set up your environment. So you need at least Visual Studio 2010. We talk about the way to set up your repository so that you can work with getting changes that may come down from that upstream or that Choco get. And then some other nice settings that can be, and we set all these settings. These are only applying to the current repository. You can choose to make some of these for your global, and if you do that, fantastic. If not, at least when you're working in that Chocolatey repository, you're getting those things in the way that we would expect. So we don't run into a lot of Git issues, right? Because when you first start getting involved in contributing, let's say Git, sometimes you may have auto CRLF turned on, and that can cause issues when you're trying to contribute, right? So we want to get you set appropriately. As we kind of roll down a little bit more, we'll get into kind of that code format. Now, one thing I will tell you is our format for coding, when you get into the C# code, is nothing like what you see when you're like, well, this isn't a best practice. Well, the best practices design guide that Microsoft puts out, we actually kind of break some of those design format things that they have just because we found something that we like better. So you do want to pay attention to that coding format there, and just as we like to say, when you come into somebody else's code, you're kind of coming to their house. You wouldn't make a mess or rearrange their kitchen. So when you come into the Choco code base and you're trying to do some things, think about the way that format is and try to follow that format because that's going to give you the most success when you're in there. And so we also bring you into how do I test, how do I debug this stuff, so you can kind of help get this thing brought in. Now, one of the things that I like to say when it comes to automated tests is it does not prove the absence of bugs. It just proves that the code works with the behaviors that you've tested. Right? So the really important thing that comes after that is when you get down to the actual commits, right? So you're going to start bringing these commits. We like our commits to be very specific, and small in some cases. So if you're working on some code, you don't want to be making an edit somewhere else that has nothing to do with that commit, and that could even be a white space change somewhere else. Really, you want to kind of focus each commit on what it's about. And so we get very what's the word I'm looking for here? I don't want to say anal, but yeah, it's a little bit anal because the thing that lives on for years and years is those commits, and so we want them to be very searchable. We want to, be very meticulous about our Git commits. And so, in doing that, we also have that expectation that when the community comes in to contribute, you'll follow these kind of rules as well. And, with that, we wanted to tag it to the issue that it's with. And so you'll see that there in that commit message. And then, we actually consider that first line a summary, right? And then, so after that, you put a space in. And you can kind of scroll down a little bit and you'll see what this actually looks like. So, right. So, we talk about how that commit body should look and how it wraps, and it gets very specific into some things. And you may think that, we're a little crazy, or maybe over the top to want to require, this kind of thing. But for us, it's kind of that, go back to that care and feeding. If somebody misses this bit of information, they may not have spent much time actually, really thinking about their change. and whether it affects things that are outside of their control and those kinds of things. And when somebody does, I mean, it doesn't mean that they've checked all those things, but it does typically mean that they have probably done a bit more, right? And so that's, for us, it provides 2 bits of information when somebody doesn't come in following the format that we expect. The next is, of course, now I'm going to bring that pull request in, and I've gotten it prepared. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. The question, again, is, do I branch off of stable or do I branch off of master, and what's the difference? Master, and so Gary and I have had conversations about these things. And so for Gary, the master branch is probably synonymous in other projects. For him, is very synonymous with what we consider our stable branch. And our master branch is very synonymous with what would be like that dev branch. Right? So the development occurs on that master branch, and it gets brought into the stable branch. The stable branch is what we actually release off of, right? For a lot of projects out there that do Git flow says those 2 branches, 2 long-lived branches are called, dev and master, and master is the one you actually deploy off of. Production branch. That's a good way of saying that, Ken. Is kind of that production branch. So when we have long-lived features or feature requests, what we like for folks to do, and it's kind of all in there, is that you create a kind of a little feature branch or a fixed branch. You do your work there, and when there's new changes that might come in Chocolatey, you're pulling down to those master and those stable, and kind of rebasing there, and then taking that and rebasing it against your commits inside of your thing. So you have these 2 branches that you keep locally, you keep pristine. You want those to match as much as possible with what's up on that upstream Chocolatey repository. So you submit your pull request out of a feature branch, and that typically goes to master. Now we do have sometimes folks submit to stable. You're going to see that Gary tends to submit to stable. He's on the Chocolatey team, so he typically knows where these things should go. So he typically submits to stable when he submits.
Or I ask before I do it just to make sure that I'm on the right page.
Yes. Right. So then that process after that is that somebody comes in. We actually take a look at that pull request. Hopefully, it's within 2 to 4 weeks. Sometimes it's faster. Sometimes it's been a bit slower. And we're all humans. And even though we have full-time folks on Chocolatey, Chocolatey's a very big infrastructure. We have a lot of different areas where we do things. So we start looking at Chocolatey stuff more when we get ready for a release, or when we've just released, and we're trying to figure out what bugs we've caused if we have, because we can't see every single environment. And so that's kind of where we have this next version of Chocolatey getting ready to come out. It fixes a couple of things. One of those was kind of a bad decision on our part, but I'm going to digress off of that. We fixed it for 10.14, and we've opened up a couple other things. So if you ever find us asking, hey, there's something that has been done inside of Chocolatey, we kind of actually do need you to basically call it fetch and rebase. That's exactly what we want you to do. When you see git pull is very attractive for folks. It's actually not really, and this might be a bit of, there could be some disagreement with other folks. I don't like git pull because of the way that it works, right? And so when you can do a fetch and rebase, you can actually have it go get that code, back up your changes, play that code against it, and then play your commits on the other side of that. And the reason that we think that is good is that, I don't know what Gary's doing here. So git pull versus fetch rebase. Git pull Batman.
There's a GIF that is it's basically this icon, this image, but it's git pull and Batman slapping Robin in the face, but it's not quite the same one. Anyway, very I digress nice. As well.
So the rebase, typically you're going to see a lot less conflicts. You get to maintain that your code is coming after whatever's latest, and you get a lot of benefits with a rebase. Now, a rebase, of course, because it's rewriting history, it's scarier for folks when they first do it. We like the rebase interactive, so we can kind of see those changes occurring. if it fails with just a simple rebase. And then you can go in and start working rebase conflicts versus pull conflicts.
So one of the comments in the chat room from Vogel there is that the Git pull has a rebase switch as well. The reason I tend not to do that though is it does now, yeah. And historically it doesn't. But even now, I probably wouldn't use that because doing a git fetch allows me to use something like git extensions to review those commits prior to actually pulling them in. So I can open up a tool, see what the upstream changes were when I fetched them, but I haven't actually altered my local history before doing anything. So that's kind of why I still tend to do it in 2 stages. So I still do the git fetch and then do the git rebase if it's required once I'm happy with the upstream changes. So definitely something to keep in mind. But yes, historically, I don't think the rebase option existed on the pull. That was a newer release of Git. Yeah.
That's newer, yeah. So if we can go over to the committers. So once you've gotten it in, you're all good, you're happy. What happens on the next side of the process is, we as committers, we have our own documentation to kind of help us through that process as well. What we're going to do is we're going to start evaluating that, and we may go commit by commit if you're like Gary and you have a white space commit in there every once in a while, which I have not seen his stuff yet, so I can't speak for that. But, we'll go through that line by line and try to provide feedback. Sometimes if you're brand new, you haven't come into Chocolatey before, you'll see, typically we'll put a lot more words into things because, we're very thankful for, people that want to contribute. But if you've been contributing for a while, you'll see it's probably a little bit more direct, right? Where we start saying, hey, this needs to change, this needs to change. That's no idea. Memorize these shell commands. So, as we get into, I think I have this up too as committing, so I'm going to pull it up, on my side to know where I'm going here. Is, once we figure out, we're going to pull this in, right? We've gotten it in, we want to look at it. We've done our review. We've kind of gone back and forth, and are now happy with it. That process we do to pull in that, pull request is, yes, there is the shiny green button up on GitHub. We don't always use it, and we typically don't always use it because we may retarget a branch to stable. And in doing that, we actually need to remove any commits that were in the master. And so we're going to do a rebase onto stable from master. And so what that's going to do is it's going to remove those master commits that aren't in stable and then replay those changes over on stable so that we can pull it in and get it released in that next version versus waiting for a later time. We may actually see that.
Now, one thing just to point out there is that if that does happen, then GitHub as a front end for Git kind of gets confused at that point, because if you have retargeted a branch or you've rebased some other on the head of the current branch, GitHub gets confused. So typically what you'll find happening there is that a pull request will be closed, but the work from that pull request will still be pulled in and will still be correctly attributed. This is one thing that confused me originally when I first started contributing to GitHub, was I was like, well, I've just done all this work and then the pull request has been closed without my work being pulled in. That's not strictly true. During the action of a rebase, you actually end up with 2 people attributed to a commit. There'll be the committer and the author. So any kind of internet points associated with that commit is still there. It's still yours. It just might not be a direct commit into the repository that would have happened if it was with that big green shiny button. So it's nothing to worry about. But I have heard feedback on a few projects. They're like, why have you closed my PR? But I know what Rob tends to do, and I've actually borrowed this from him, is that if he does go through that process, he'll provide a link in the pull request to the merge commit that happened so that you can kind of track where your work went. And like I say, I borrowed that from the process that Rob followed when I first started contributing to Chocolatey.
And I probably borrowed that from somewhere else where I saw it and thought, this is good. It's good communication, right? If we do that outside of Git, where we do that retargeting to stable, we'll come back and say, hey, we merged this in, rebased it and merged it into stable and we provide that link to the actual commit so they can go see that. Now, one of the things you'll see when we do merging, right? So this is what I wanted to bring over here for us. When we do merging, we turn off fast forwarding, so we always want to have a merge commit. in case we need to back that off. And we also do I like to have the the log on, so you can actually see the commits that are associated with that particular thing. So it'll actually log out all of those commits. And so those two things gives us that merge commit. And that's something that we want to see on an actual merge, and that's why another reason why we don't like git pull, because it does a fetch and merge. We don't want to see those merge commits except when we intentionally do a merge. All right. I think that gets us through all of that. And so that really the next step is, we could start actually reviewing some of this stuff.
So just as a precursor for what we're away to do, these are not contrived examples. I this morning submitted 2 PRs to Chocolatey, but those were items that were slated for me to do, and it just so happened that after PowerShell Summit, I think Rob was in attendance at PowerShell Summit, and there was a group of PowerShell streamers who did a side session at PowerShell Summit on what is streaming, why they do it, what they get out of it, all that sort of conversations. And out of that, Rob kind of suggested it might be good to get him on the stream to talk, or this stream, to talk about essentially what Chocolatey does and why we do things in a certain way. So the pull requests that we're away to review are ones that I've submitted. I like to think I followed this entire process that Rob's just outlined here. We might find out if I missed something. So a good opportunity for me to have a review as well.
Gary will know.
But one thing I wanted to pick up on the chat room there was that Matthias on the Cake project, that's another project, an open source project that I work on. We unashamedly stole this contributing and committers guideline and pulled it into the Cake project because we felt that it kind of outlined everything that a good open source project and good open source citizens would want to do. So we borrowed that and attributed it back, but this to me, when I first read it, was kind of everything that you needed in order to know what to do when you're contributing to the project. And I know some people don't always read the documentation, which is unfortunate, but this for me was an easy to follow guide when I first looked at it. And going back to the point about it's not something I always bring up, but I think I will because Rob's here. The first PR that I ever did to an open source project was Chocolatey, and unfortunately that 2 to 4 week estimate wasn't quite that. It was a little bit longer than that. But what I do like to say about that process was that it was the first time that I had figured out or got instructed about what a rebase was, and I remember at the time Rich Siegel, a contributor to Chocolatey, he walked me through the entire interactive rebase process, and I just thought that this was magical. It's like, well, I didn't know what I was doing or why I was doing it, but Rich talked me through that in an issue, and it was my first introduction into doing an interactive rebase. And since then, it's something I use almost every day now. But it was a great process to walk through and be instructed on how to do it. So there we go. Okay.
And I can pop that into chat for anybody that's interested.
Oh, that's the historical one. Is that my first one? Let's bring it up. Let's remind myself.
I believe so.
It was this the Chocolatey shortcut one? The install Chocolatey shortcut? Yeah.
This is the one that he went through. Yeah.
So, and there was a very long. This is Rich. I'm saying that right, isn't it? Rismoni is Rich Siegel, isn't it? Yes, it is. Yeah. So he walked me through the process of how to do it, what I was doing, and it was like I literally said, "This is magic" at some point, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is history." This is so. This was a while back. This was my 2013. That was kind of around my first foray into open source. So it was good fun.
Yeah, so that's what 6 years.
Yeah, right about that.
6 years. At least being somewhat familiar with Chocolatey enough to send in a pull request.
The other thing, just to point out, in case some people on the stream haven't seen it, we created some additional GitHub organizations for Chocolatey recently. So we've now got the Chocolatey organization, and we've also got a Chocolatey archive organization. The idea being that any projects that existed under the main Chocolatey organization were moved into this archive organization, just so it's clear that these things are no longer being worked on. And the other one that we have is a Chocolatey community one that I can't type because I am speaking. We have a Chocolatey community one, so the split there is these are the repositories that are driven by the community but supported by Chocolatey, and the ones that still exist under the Chocolatey organization are the ones that are driven by Chocolatey ourselves. So just to be clear about that segregation. Okay, so pull request time?
Yeah. So it's worth noting these documents contributing and committing have been around since a long time. I was trying to find when we actually created the committing. The contributing is well over January 2013. It's even older than that. That's as far back in the history as I can get. We started adding in like a lot of that better documentation, kind of verifying that process in 2015. That's when we started putting a lot more of that stuff in there. So, all right.
Okay, so let's close these off. So I have 2 pull requests that I would like reviewed. There's a simple one, and then there's a harder one. So should we start with the simple one?
Shall we?
I think so.
So yeah, let's do that. So
it's pull request 1826 is the one that I raised this morning. So this one was as a result of an issue that was raised by someone in the community. So they raised an issue which said that when they first attempted to build the Chocolatey project in Visual Studio, let me correct that. When they tried to run the build.bat file that builds the entire Chocolatey solution, they were seeing an error when they came to restoring the NuGet packages. And this is kind of a known issue in the sense that me and Rob knew about it, and we had a workaround internally that we could put in play. The problem here is really NuGet, unfortunately. I don't like saying that, but it really was NuGet. When you install or when you run NuGet.exe, the latest version of NuGet.exe, and I explain this here, it adds the v3 feed into the machine level NuGet.config file. And what happens is some of the packages that Chocolatey depends on are not available on that v3 feed. And it will only work if you have the v2 feed configured. And the workaround that I knew about was, well, let's just go to the machine.config file and add that feed in directly so that it will work. Now, obviously, that's not ideal because it means additional steps that someone has to do in order to make the project build. So this community member, who is David Berg, he suggested that we put that information into a solution level NuGet.config file, so it's available there and then. And I thought that was a good idea, so I thought I will do this work. And Rob commented on this a few days ago, suggesting that this should be done, and it would target stable, and then it could be merged into master. So this is one of those situations where it can go directly into stable and then merge back to master when we're kind of getting ready to close that out. So it means it will be going out sooner rather than later. So that's what I did, and that's what I created this PR for. So,
and the other thing is it doesn't have to be tied to any release since it's just a code base change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Cool. Alrighty. So we're in here. The very first thing that I like to do is just spend a moment and kind of read over the conversations. That very first note saying, okay, all this stuff. And by the way, I haven't actually seen these yet, so you're getting the kind of the look. Hopefully there's no WTF-ery as I go through here. I'll try to tone that down a little bit. But just kind of looking at it, kind of looking it over, see if there's any obvious glaring things that need to be changed, and then also kind of taking a look at the details. And so the very first place that I look is right here at that top level. Somebody has given us, here's that information, kind of reading over it. I look at the very top up there, and I look to see if there's an issue attributed with it, or if it's maintenance or it's doc, right? So you can see Gary has already correctly put GH-1816. So I already know that this applies to an actual issue. Another thing he has done is he's assuming this fixes that. So he's put either closes or fixes down at the bottom. And that's not in the commit. We're going to go check. That should not be in the commit. That little fixes 1816 because we have the reference to the commit by that GH1816. So next place I go, let's go look at the commits, right? So I do a little bit more there. I want to see that summary. You see that summary, and then we can click on it, and as we see the actual commit text itself. And so when we get in here, I want to see I don't want to see fix this thing. I want to know what the problem was. Why are we actually doing this? And, what does this actually provide? And this may be the thing you spend the most time on. Honestly, you may make a one character change, and you might write a book that explains why you did it. And that's completely fine. And the real point of that is when I'm coming through here later and I'm trying to figure out why did I make this change versus somebody else, because, I don't know about Gary, but I suffer from, I can't remember why I made that change. I want to be able to tell my, have my former self have told me, why it is that I made this change. And I've been back at, 4-year-old code wondering, why is this here? In fact, we were doing that, was it 2 weeks ago? When we were looking at, 3 weeks ago. We were diving into the 409 conflict issue, that was going between Chocolatey and, Chocolatey.org and trying to figure out why is it that we had this here. And, former self, did not give myself a lot of information, but we were able to locate why it was that way and then start making those changes, right? And so sometimes the commit that's there is going to tell us that we did this because that's what we had for the information at the time. So we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, we have NuGet configuration, machine level may not include that because Chocolatey needs to have that V2 feed for some of the packages that it's restoring for this particular repository. And so, the existing one that we had in the NuGet folder doesn't look like it's being used. And so what we're looking to do is bring that in at the solution level. And probably the reason that the one in the NuGet folder isn't being used is somebody isn't running build.bat. They're just opening up the solution and trying to do that restore from there. We should be able to support both of those use cases. And so let's kind of roll down here. So now you can see that we have added a key. And this is sitting at source NuGet config. And so this is at that level where that Chocolatey solution is at. And we're saying we might have a clear. I don't know about the clear.
So the point that Kim was making here was that, so I tried it both ways. So I got it to work the way it is with just what's in this NuGet token without the clear being in there. The reason that the thought process that I had, I didn't note this in the comment, but maybe I should have. The thought process that I had was that if someone is using an internal feed for those packages, then clearing it and only using the NuGet one would circumvent any sort of offline caching that they're doing. So I thought an additional one which would ensure that it would work would be the way to go, as opposed to blowing away any machine level configuration that they did want to have. And that's kind of the thought process I was having.
So if they're like using MyGet or the internal repository for those NuGet packages that they've pre-cached, we would definitely want that to still work for them. So I guess that makes sense. I would say probably not have the clear. So this particular change I'm pretty happy with. So then my next step, and I don't think this is going to come up on your screen until I actually click go, is I pull up the review changes link, and you could just show it there if you want. And so what I do is if I'm ready to go, and if I'm not ready to go, it's a comment. I found changes that I've already put a review, and we're going to get to those in a minute. But in this case, I'm simply going to click on approve. I'll probably type, looks good to me, or the short version of that, LGTM, and then click submit. What that just says, that's my thumbs up. Everything looks good. Let's pass the test, which we didn't talk about. But when we come back over that conversation, should probably. Yeah.
So Matthias is pointing out in something the clear would increase performance if it doesn't skip any non-working feeds, and it's probably a fair point. But it's also not something that I think a project should be responsible for. So really, all we're trying to do here is to ensure that the restore would work, and if they have any additional concerns, then they need to control that NuGet in their own environment. This is something that will make it work in all the edge cases that we're aware of.
Yeah, so if you could reload that, it didn't actually show when I commented there. Reload the page real quick on that conversation.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Here it didn't update. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I saw your approval come through.
Yeah, so there, I just said, I just want to ensure maximum compatibility, and then I think, we're here to go ahead and resolve that conversation, so I'll go ahead and click that link to resolve it, and this will be ready to go. So, the next step in the process, as we're pointing this out, one of the things that, if we take a look here, you'll see that it says, GEP13 force push this branch. And so, clearly there's a question. If all the documentation you read says never force push, why did we force push?
I can tell you that I can tell you the story of why I force pushed this branch.
I was going to get to the reason why we do force pushes, but if you want, we can leave that out another time. So the reason that we do that, or why people are wanting to do that. So the nice thing about Git is Git, in a lot of cases, allows you to rewrite history. And to borrow the words of Pete Galby, Git allows you to be perfect. So be perfect. As long as you're not pushing into that main repository or that central location, or you're not pushing on what you like, this Chocolatey Choco. You can't force push there, but in your own branch, that's this thing that's coming in. You can absolutely force push to those branches. In fact, it's recommended so that you're taking things, you're kind of cleaning them up. If we request that these two things are actually this one commit, can you go ahead and put them together, or squash them, or fix all that stuff. We want that to be done so that we pull that commit in. What we have for the commit coming in is just the stuff that it's kind of like here's everything that's surrounding this fix and the reasoning behind it. Not here's all the process I went through to get to that. And so that's where the force pushing comes in.
Yep. To illustrate that point, I mean, you never want to force push on the master branch or on the stable branch in Chocolatey's case, because if you did that, the rewriting of that history would essentially break any clones that had taken that clone before the force push happened. So there's definitely a time and a place for a force push, and this one, because it was on my branch or my feature branch, is the right place to do it.
Yeah. Now that's interesting. I didn't know that the force push would actually show you the difference between the old and the new.
I think that's new. That's a new thing here. Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of that. Another reason for force push. Well, I'm going to go with a different thing. If you ever put a password or something that you shared or some other secret, my recommendation is to take that repository down immediately while you're trying to assess your damage, and then figure out if you're going to bring it back online. If you ever, and maybe there's another area there where we could talk about, if you're ever like, hey, we have this internal code base, we're going to open source it. My recommendation is just to don't keep your history that's internal, make sure there's no passwords in that. And that's what you first open source is at that where you're at now, because it's really hard to go back through history and make sure that you didn't have a password in there at some point. There's some tools out there that can do this auditing as well.
Now, I only found out about this tool today, actually. I don't know whether it does history of the repository, but certainly this is an audit at the very least at the current state of the repository to see if there is any secrets being in there. And it's a utility tool that you can run on Mac, Linux, and Windows. The reason I know about this is because someone submitted a pull request to have this added as a GitHub action into the new GitHub Action UI. So anytime you have a pull request or a commit into a repository, you can run this tool to ensure that you haven't accidentally put something in there. Now, this is something that GitHub to an extent does for you. It does at least some scanning of things like API keys and things, because I know that I've seen security notifications come through to certain repositories to say that I've done something silly, or potentially done something silly. But this is a tool that will allow you to do that offline as well. So definitely something.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools for GitHooks and other things. And it looks like, of course, Matthias has also talked about filtering the branch, where you can go through and kind of pull something out all the way across your history. Those are really advanced methods that you can do with Git. It's super powerful. Going back to that XKCD comment, it can do a lot of things. Some of those things, are going to require some pretty advanced knowledge. And I think it's fair to say that some of us are pretty good with Git. We can do a lot of the main stuff. When it comes to that advanced stuff, we definitely look it up every time. And try not to do anything that requires that. So, there's another thing, like if something is failing a test, you can actually go back in history and figure out what was really Git bisect. Whereas the first time that this was actually breaking. But for that, you actually have to have, make sure that all of your commits actually build. That's Git is magic. That's a great answer. Git really does a lot. And we could say it is magic. Okay, so, I think we're at a case, sorry, I ramble. I hope that's okay. We're coming back to our adding that new Git config. I think we're ready to go ahead and merge. So there is a shiny green button. Because this is targeting stable, we're able to just go ahead and I can click that little guy. We're going to go ahead and do that merge. And so this, when we do it this way, the nice thing is we do have that merge command. It's going to show us. We can copy that link and then we can go back to 1816. If we look at 1816, we're going to see that it's still open. Typically, it closes with the merge because of that closes this number. It doesn't look like that happened just
that
yet.
Only happens on the default branch.
Only happens on master.
Whatever the default branch is.
So we could say this is fixed. This has merged. And I'll say into stable. Into stable x. What? And master at, and to get that last message, I would have to go in and actually do that pull and rebase. I don't know, is this something we want to try to share my screen, or do we want to kind of just talk
we can try that. So this is something we were experimenting with earlier. I'm going to try and share Rob's screen through Skype. So Rob's sitting up there through Skype, through there on Skype, but I'm going to try and share his screen as well. So can you start sharing, Rob, and I'll see if I can pick it up?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go for this screen. The right screen.
Okay, let me see if I can pick it up. That's that one there.
And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this a little bigger. So I'm going to roll that text up. There we go.
It's trying. So now if I...
But this doesn't work out.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, we're in, yeah. So I actually have some work I was working on, and I can take a look at my work here. I'll get diff cache. Take a look at my work here. Well, I'm working on something that looks like we're bringing in optimize, right? So I'm going to go ahead and stash this so I can go back to that other thing. So I've added it. Git add, git stash. That's all we need, right? So now we're back at the base. Now what I need to do is actually do my fetch and rebase, right? So I got to make sure that I'm on the good stuff. So I'm going to do a git fetch. Now I have a couple of repositories set up. So if we look at git remote -v, you're going to see a ton of repositories there. But basically I have my branch and then I have that stable branch, right? So here we go. So we're going to do git fetch upstream. And that should pull in, at the very least, it looks like stable has changed, right? I'm on stable, and so I'll do a get Actually, I like to do git lg, see what I got. That's pretty good. Now let's take a look. I also like to pull up git extensions and take a look at what we have in here. And so here we are. We got a couple other things. Here's upstream stable. And so we can go ahead and git rebase upstream stable, and that should bring me up to that latest there. So now if I do git lg, you can see that I'm right up on that. I don't have any commits past that, so there was nothing really to rebase. It's kind of like that fast forward, right? And there's nothing there. But all right, so now we've got that up. The next thing I need to do is flip over to master, right? And then I'm going to simply do a git merge stable. And you see it's brought in a couple of things. So there's actually quite a few commits that came in here. If we look at git lg, we're going to see there. By the way, lg is a switch that an alias that I have. It's like git log -- one line -- pretty -- like this crazy thing. Git lg is a lot easier to type than this like long long alias. Let's see if I can pull up git config global. Is it get?
Pass.
It's not get. So take out the word get and change it with -- get. There it is. Typing that every time would be kind of crazy. So it's better to have that set as an alias where I can just do something really quick. So I also want to take a look at this visually and see. And you can see, and this is going to be really tiny here, but here's what came in when we did that. So this is that logging. So get when we pull in or merge, it's going to log like a few of the commits in there, and we can kind of see those. And so we know we had some other things that we brought in from stable as well when we did that merge. And so now that we've done that, we go back to stable here, and then we are going to say, oh, we need to push up to our origin. Before I go to origin with those, I want to go back because I'm going to the upstream. I want to go ahead and push upstream, because if that fails, right, so I want both stable and master on upstream, because if that fails, I want to be able to fix it locally before I try to push again, because I do want my not my local, but my remote branch and the upstream branch to sort of match and be pristine on those things. And so that has worked out. So then I'll go ahead and get pushed, and that'll go out to my origin, right? So that should push both stable and master. Yep, and we've done that. So that's that process that we go through there. And so now we come back over here and take a look. We have merged it in. And this is a little bit tiny, so let's bump it up a little bit here. And is this still me? No, this is you now. All right. So I'll go back over here to code, and I actually click on that link, and it brings me in, and I can come down, and there's that merge branch to stable. So that's where that came in. So I'm going to grab that commit as well. So that's showing that 1860 got merged into master at that point. So if somebody upgrades to at least that version, they're going to be able to be successful. So then I come down here. Close the comment.
Cool. So I'm getting reports of there being an echo coming through, so I'm going to stop sharing. If you want to stop sharing, Rob, just now, hopefully that will drop off that echo a little bit. Yeah, Mateus is saying that you're agreeing with yourself on certain things. So I'm going to go ahead.
I think I just stopped sharing just now,
and I'm going to turn that off. So that should be back to me now.
Okay.
So hopefully that will be better for everyone. And now your Skype window's changed size again, so I'm going to put you back up here. There's some weirdness happening with the NDI plugin that we're using. So
sure.
So echoes off.
If you could scroll to the top of this one, there's a couple of points we forgot here, right? So we had a label for backlog, right? This actually moved into, so if you click the little labels drop down, this moved into what's considered ready and working just meant Barry had it to a state. We're actually done now, and so we would take away backlog. We would mark done. I don't know where we would put in some of these other keys because it's not an enhancement to. When we talk about enhancement, that would be an enhancement for something that this release will do that would have an issue that we would talk about as part of that release. I guess at best we could consider it an issue or a bug with the actual code base, and so we could link it with bug.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and check that box. And then the other thing is I would mark no release notes. Now we don't actually have anything as far as this going to an actual. It's not being set to a milestone of something that we're releasing. So that's just an additional thing that we're adding there. So then. Just to clue us in that we're not going to put this into any release notes because it's available right now for someone that's building that code. So,
yep,
that's that.
And from my point of view, the only other thing that needs to be done from a contributor's point of view is that GitHub's now telling me that this branch that I created on my fork can now be deleted. So I've got this option now to delete that. So I can go ahead and do that, and then I'll probably get an option to say delete fork. Which I don't necessarily want to do, but this is something that GitHub's recently added as well, that having deleted the branch, you can also delete the fork associated with it. But I tend to, once I'm contributing to a project, I tend to keep that fork up to date with the upstream so that they're always in sync. But that's just a kind of process that I've gotten into. Matthias is pointing out, by the way, good tip for your OSS repos. .NET new NuGet config will create a NuGet config cleared and with only v3 feeds. So I place in root where I do my OSS work, so my corp feeds don't interfere when building. That sounds like a. But again, so what Matthias is suggesting there is something that a person could decide to do, but we as a project would still need this modification to this NuGet config that we made so that ours would build regardless of any upstream changes. Okay, so that is the first pull request done and dusted. Mm-hmm. So the second one was with regard to this export command that I have added. So I thought what I would do was I could show what it's currently doing or what it does. So what I've got here is a locally built version of Chocolatey, and if I go in here and I just type choco.exe and then -h, what I've done is I've added in a new command into the list of available commands that Chocolatey offers. So this is the standard list, and then down the bottom here is I've added this export command, which is saying it exports a list of currently installed packages.
Scroll up just a little bit so we can see it.
Oh, sorry.
Your head was in the way.
My head.
There we go. Perfect.
So yeah, export a current list of currently installed packages. And then if I go down back to here and do that again, this time with export -h, then I will get the context help specifically for the Choco Export command. And I should say hello to Patrick, who's just joined the stream as well. Hello, Patrick. So this is the export command. This is the usage, and these are some examples of what you can do there. So to show it in action, what I ended up doing was I went ahead and did Choco Export, and then I can specify an output file path. So I can say something like c temp and then packages.config. And then if I run that and then run over to my c temp folder, which is here, there's one I created earlier, so I'm going to delete that one. So if I go ahead and open this up in code, then what we'll get is a list of all the currently installed packages that I have on my machine, exported into a file that can then be replayed to Chocolatey's install command. So in theory, if I were the reason that this is desired is that, let's imagine you're going from one machine to a new machine. You want to do an export of all your current packages that are on your machine, and then go over to your other machine and then replay all of those package installations. So rather than typing them all out manually, you can say choco install packages.config file, the path to that packages.config file, and then Chocolatey will go in and install all of these packages for you. So the other thing that I added to this was then I could do include version numbers. And if I do that and I run back over to Chocolatey, the packages.config file, then you'll see that it's also included the currently installed version number in the packages.config file as well. And what the new export command will do behind the scenes is if you've kind of given the same file name again, then it will back up the one that was there, so you've got a copy of it, and it'll replay the file on top of the file name that you've given. So it tries not to break anything, and if you've given it the same file path, it backs it up. So the difference between these two would literally be one's got version numbers in it and one doesn't. So it's kind of trying to be a safe operation as well. So that's what I've done. This is a functionality that has been sought after in Chocolatey for a while. There are various scripts that can do it. There's PowerShell commandlets and things you can do to generate the file that I've got here. There's also functionality within Chocolatey GUI for doing this work, but this is it going back into Chocolatey directly. So the question that Kim's asked in the chat room is something that has come up before. We'll maybe talk about that in a bit, Kim, because there was a comment on the PR itself from Richard Simpson about that very topic. So we'll come on to that. I won't forget about it, but it's something we should... I don't think it needs to be done in this PR because there are other questions that need to be addressed before we can come to package parameters and installer arguments for the export. So that's the functionality that I've added, and I've done that, or rather, we did that on those streams that I spoke about back in January, and the PR that I've created is the output of that streams condensed into hopefully a correctly formatted PR ready to be reviewed and talked about. And Manfred's sending me a link to something, so let's just bring this up to see what I've forgotten about. Oh, we've just got Anthony's on the stream as well. Hi Anthony, how's it going?
Mr. Mastery?
Indeed.
Yeah, you must be popular.
So,
all right.
Have I got a spelling mistake? Those packages onto a new machine using Choco install. I'm not seeing what. Gonna have to help me out there, Manfred. I guess there's a typo in the description of the command. I'm not seeing it. Packages. And onto export all packages to a file and then reinstall those packages onto a new machine. I don't know. It sounded right to me in my head when I was typing it. Export all packages to a file and then reinstall those packages onto new machine.
He's looking for more of a human response. Did you say that out loud?
Possibly.
Okay. Just true.
There should be a... and then Maurice is saying that I should have an alias for CEXP. Now, I think I'm right in saying, Rob, that we are moving away from those aliases that we have. So there's one for Cup, which is Chocolatey Update or Choco Upgrade. There is one for CInst, which is Choco Install. We're moving away from those going forward, right? So I don't think we should be adding in a new CX one at this point. I don't think. But something to discuss, I guess.
Yeah, we're kind of trying to get away from. There's CInst and there's Choco Install. The reason that we stopped promoting that is we had a lot of folks out there going, okay, well, you can install things. What about upgrading? And Choco Upgrade, Cup, which was news to folks, which we thought was kind of interesting. Like if it was Choco and then the subcommand, they're like, oh, there's probably other subcommands too. But just kind of getting that into to folks' minds and help framing that was really trying to get away from those shorter commands. Yes, they are great. Sorry about that, Maurice.
So I mean, I tend to point that as whenever I've seen a blog post or a script that's using cinst or cinstm that used to be there. I've made suggestions that they should use the more ubiquitous Choco install or Choco upgrade, simply because it might go away eventually. So, but anyway, so I don't think we'll be doing that, Maurice, but thanks for the suggestion. So anyway, back to this pull request review. So I don't know, you want to take over, Rob, and tell me what I need to do different?
Sure. So same difference. Nothing changes on that. We're going to look at the wording here, and this gives us the same. My first question for you that I can't ask out loud, but let's say I could, is if I don't specify packages.config and I just type Choco Export, does that work? And you did run it. I just wanted to come back and re-verify that actually does behave in the way I want, so I don't actually have to say I need an output path. Right? And so we do see that. We'll do that. Creates it with packages.config. Maybe. Right?
Yeah. So if I go back to Choco, if I look at the help, it does state in the help that it will default, I think, to packages.config. Or I certainly meant to write that.
And so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start right down that commit chain. Right? I'm going to take a look at correct white space. Yeah, that's fine. I didn't do anything but that. And so then I'm going to jump to the next commit, which is to change the modifier for the method. And that is giving us a NuGet service. So we're adding in that interface. We're actually providing something in there that's making this public, right? So we're actually getting to this so we can use it later, right? So that's important. So the method can be consumed from elsewhere. We just want to extend it so we can get to it. So we're just exposing it on the interface there, and so we can use it in other places. And so that's that. And so then we get into the real meat of this, which is adding that export command. So you go that route.
And the reason I split those two was because for me, the changing of that public modifier had nothing to do with the context of the export command. It was secondary to the export functionality. So that's why I split it into two different commits.
Found it. So what's great is Anthony was the one that actually, just having Anthony on here is kind of fun. Anthony was the one that actually first brought this up.
Was it?
Issue number 67 on February 16th of 2012. Right, and you can see we said, great, sounds awesome, and then tons of other people are like, is this in there yet? Is this in there yet? Lots of people want this. So going back to that original. Yeah, so there's a link right off of this, right, to the original. I was looking for this, furiously looking for the actual issue so that I could find my Google through or my GitHub search tree was not working. So I was looking for export in there. So
there we go. Look at that.
Yeah, so long time ago, right? I don't know if Anthony even remembers he requested this when he first jumped on, but as we come back over to looking at our export command, it has been submitted. So usage of this command, creation of the packages config, currently install packages on machine. When I look at this, the next question I have is, okay, I see this -O. Is that short for -- output? And following the convention that we have with some of the other things. And we look at that, and there's output file path. But for some of the other commands that we have out there, we actually use the term output. Right? So we want to kind of match that so we get that consistency across those different things, right? So this is an area where, me being on all these things, I already know that when I look at this, I definitely want an output. So that's the first thing that's going to go on to my thing. And I'm going to do these instead of kind of bringing them all together. And basically, there's two things. So if you can click on the little plus symbol next to 49 there, just to show people. There's add a single comment, start a review. Typically, I would start a review. In this case, I'm going to start with a single comment so we can kind of see these things as we go. And so, we will use regards to output. Right? So do we use O anywhere else with regards to output? Additionally, we use outputs in a few places. Let's keep this consistent. So I'm going to go ahead and add that comment. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to notice is on line 51 that for this particular one, we are removing the ceramic quote. So that's really important because that is what does the actual work for removing the quote and the single tick, just to make sure when those things get passed in different ways that it is getting that out, and so that we only have that output file path left and the quotes surrounding it. So that's good. So when we get out here, we got include version numbers. And I wonder in my head, and I know what I'm going to come back and say later is, well, could we reuse version?
Could we
Okay. So this is a case where Gary come back and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. And so I would say, you're right. I like to include version numbers because that's more. You probably have to reload for these things to show up. And so the back and forth here is, I'm asking a question. So when we ask questions, sometimes, we're not always giving like the best idea because we may or may not understand something. So it's okay for you to come back and say, actually, I don't think that that's quite what it was meant for. And hopefully there's something better than
So in this case, no. Just on the other point that you made there, Kim was also suggesting in the chat that it would be output file, and then output file path to cover all the bases. Mm-hmm. So I think we've got a history in Chocolatey options of including all the things. So it's maybe another scenario where we'd add some more options in there as well.
And then the question is, if we do that, do we go back for consistency purposes and start putting it on those? Oh, and this is kind of interesting, and you guys already went with this on previous things, is there is that parsing of arguments, and what we're using there is index options, and it's a great parser. Now, there are other parsers out there that we looked at originally. There were some that were really, really good. But we ended up with this one just because it allowed us to separate out. So if we run that export -H, what you saw is there's this base level of options that are at the global level, and then there's the options that are very specific to this command. And so that is one of the reasons we ended up using that, is just so we could reuse some of the arguments that were there before. I'm sure since 2014, when the development of this was going, 2015 when we started, there's probably some parsers out there that are much more improved now. I saw that.
There are no words sometimes.
And then, there are folks that just comment on things because they know it's going to show up on this thing. So there's that too. All right. So now, next thing is additional argument parsing. If we see any unparsed arguments come through, we're actually going to throw an error. This is interesting because there's not a lot of places where we actually do this in other places. We typically ignore them. So what I'm going to say is, because we have a feature switch where if we see arguments that come through that we don't know about, we just ignore them. That's kind of the default with Chocolatey, mostly because there might be something that's coming in and being actually parsed further up the stream, right? In cases like Chocolatey for Business types of things, or Chocolatey Pro even, getting up into that commercial stuff. There's also, maybe there's a dark feature where we want to be able to pass something in. Additionally here, I might want to pass properties later. Properties could come in as unparsed arguments. We would take that away later to do that because we'd be making those changes here. But having it there, to me, is good. Maybe not the right thing at this place. So Jim's actually going back to the code base here.
The reason I brought the code base up is because I think I borrowed that. So the way that we went through the export command was kind of basing on a command that already existed. Awesome. So I'm just trying to remember what thought process I was going through when I was doing that. So there is no other examples of whether it's greater than 0. Which is what I've added into the export command, but there are cases where it's greater than 1. So maybe that's where I borrowed it from and then decremented it because there isn't an additional sub command on the export, whereas the ones that I potentially was copying from do throw an error because you might do Choco feature enable or Choco feature disable, and if there are more than one unparsed argument, then it's not going to work, which is why it throws an error in those cases.
Correct. And for those, we actually want to be sure that somebody is putting those things in the proper order. So we do throw that error. There's a lot of places where we take all those unparsed arguments and we just join them and then pass them to input so they can be used further downstream.
Yeah.
If you take a look at the Chocolatey info command, that would be a good place to see that. I do want to say even install has that. If you look at the handle additional argument parsing, it does the same thing.
So sorry to interrupt. There's a question from Anthony in the chat room there about whether I'm assuming it's referring to the style of having multiple options for this or multiple ways of expressing the same option. Will that style eventually collide or prevent useful option parsing or guessing? I don't know.
So yes, the guessing is definitely available. I don't know if you've got to play with the having the Chocolatey profile loaded. So you type Choco, and then you start hitting tab. And when you put space, tab, starts putting all the different commands up. You pick that command, so you tab over, and then you get context menu sensitive stuff. So if I started typing -O and hit tab, it would go output file, right? That kind of thing is definitely already in Chocolatey as part of what you get. You have to add that profile. You see the question there you saw it. Okay.
I did from Patrick, yes.
But if you put in something that is wrong and it comes back and goes, "Hey, did you mean?" Right. So some of that guessing that may give you. You'll still be able to do that. The big thing I'm worried about, like you're using that O, is do we use that O anywhere else? And I want to be sure that we're very specific when we pick those one character items, those short, as I call them, short commands, to make sure that we're not doing that. And we're probably not using O anywhere. I just really like to reduce those things. So we have the D for debug, V for verbose, not for version. See what I mean? Trace, we actually say you have to spell out trace. We don't do a short version of that. The T is actually a time on one of them. And I think it actually means something else on a different command. And so that's a case where we're like, well, we got to be really careful about whether these go up to global. In this case, that output is specific to export. So does it make sense to have a simple O there? Do that. Alrighty. I honestly don't know how much time the stream is supposed to go?
So we
How much time do
we
have?
normally run to about 10's a hard stop for me, so that's where I would draw the line under it. So we have up to and including 42 minutes, and then I'll switch it off. So
okay, fair point. We'll hope to make it quite a ways here. I don't know if we'll get it all the way pulled in by then, because the next step for me is to kind of play with it, see if that consistency is all in there, and then kind of work through that. So the next here is our validation. No additional validation is necessary. We've already done some of that when we did the argument parsing. And then our help message. So one of the things we recently added were exit codes, and it looks like Gary has already went back and added the exit codes. Very good.
I did. So I borrowed that from whichever command I copied. So I did that as part of the rebasing of the original work that was done as part of the stream to include the exit codes.
Export output file path with version numbers. Yeah.
Where has Rob gone? I think Rob has gone. Or have I gone? Can someone on the chat room tell me if they can still hear me? Oh no. Oh no. Where's my internet gone? No. Where's my internet gone? I'm going to try and fix this. So what I don't know at this point is whether it is my network connection here in the garage that's gone, or whether it's the one in the house that's gone. Oh, hold on. I think I'm coming back. Can you hear me? Okay. Let's see what's going on over here. Nothing there yet. Hello? Not in channel. What does that mean? Okay, let's go back to here. We need to make a connect. What's going on here? Attempted to reconnect. So what's going on here? Network internet. Phone network access. I have no idea what's going on. Let's make this phone call again. Hello? So I've got you back, but I haven't got a network connection from my Windows PC for some reason. And I don't fully understand why. At this point, I'm not sure what to do for the best, whether it's a case of rebooting the machine or whether it's ipconfig release. I can try that. No operation can be performed on local area connection 2 while it has media disconnected. I have no idea what that means. That's a new one on me. I think I'm going to reboot. I'm going to stop the stream.